Welcome back to World Studies. Hopefully you might have noticed the video that I found on YouTube and posted onto our schedule. It basically was an inspiring video of the speech that John F. Kennedy gave about the moon landing that was going to take place. So hopefully you found that. It's only about 3.5-minute video. Definitely worth seeing, just to see a part of history coming back alive. Plus, he's a better speech giver than I ever will be, so more enjoyable to listen to than if I would have tried to say it. We're at Roman numeral 3, transition in the Third World and Middle East. Hopefully you did the homework that I assigned yesterday, page 155, 156, and you took the chapter 19 quiz. Question might be asked, what is a third world country? You've probably heard that term used before, but not necessarily know what it means. Well, some use this term to refer to the very poor countries of the world, but that was not the original meaning. Third world, countries that remained neutral by not allying with the free or communist nations. First world countries were the U.S. and countries allied to the U.S. Second world countries were those of the Soviet Union and their allies. And then the third world, they would be the neutral countries. Of course, today that's not how we use it, but that's the original definition of a third world. Many of these countries were located in the regions of Latin America, South America, Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Asia. So let's talk about some of these places. We're not going to go into great details with all of them because, well, we don't have time for that. This is also 7th grade history. So let's just highlight a few key spots around the world. India had been demanding independence for some time now. Britain allowed them some self-rule, but India wanted complete independence sooner than the British did. Some revolutionaries resorted to violent confrontations with the British. One man rejected violence and played an important role in India's independence through methods that were more peaceful. His name was Mohandas Gandhi. He led a movement known as passive resistance. The idea here is using nonviolence to resist British rule, rather than violence to achieve Indian independence. Examples of resistance methods included going on strikes, refusing to pay taxes, and so on and so forth. After years of Indian resistance, the British finally gave them their independence. In 1947, India and Pakistan were given their independence. Both at this time had been identified as India collectively, but now that they've become independent, they were divided into two countries, primarily over religious reasons. India being Hindu, Pakistan being Muslim. Although independent, peace will elude them. Gandhi was assassinated in 1948 by a Hindu nationalist. Conflict has continued to divide the people. Violence has continued over religious and ethnic differences. Shortly after gaining independence, rioting broke out between the Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. About 500,000 people died in this rioting. Nearly 12 million people moved between these newly created nations. Violent clashes have continued, and these countries have endured many deadly struggles between various ethnic and religious groups. Letter B, the rise of nationalist groups. World War II taught the European nations that their colonial territories ought to be free, as they had fought for their freedom against the Axis powers. These colonies sent troops to support their mother countries, but now they wanted their independence. In fact, over the course of the next 35 years, nearly 120 nations will emerge from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Number one, let's begin with Africa. If you look at page 359, it shows you a map of Africa and parts of the Middle East, and it shows you all of the countries that gained their independence, and it gives you the time frames, the decades in which they got their independence. In 1957, Ghana became the first African American nation to achieve independence post-World War II. Britain had recognized the need to grant Africans their independence. Ghana had an educated population and was an ideal colony to start this process. Elections took place, and the colony peacefully developed into an independent nation. Think of Ghana as the first success story. However, not all nations enjoyed a peaceful transfer to independence. One example of a failed transfer was Zimbabwe, which fought a civil war between the African majority and European minority populations. Zimbabwe had been called Southern Rhodesia, and the minority European population had declared independence from Britain in 1965, fearing that Britain would force them to accept majority rule. A civil war erupted between whites and blacks that lasted until 1979, after that, which case a dictator took over. The fact of the matter is, Africa is not a simple, clear-cut picture of either success or failure. Some nations prospered, some suffered, some supported socialism, and some leaders were corrupt. Some nations built schools, hospitals, and more. Some nations deteriorated with time, unable to handle a free market economy. Some well-intentioned leaders thought socialism was the answer to their problems. Some leaders thought only to improve their own bank accounts. Number 2, Southeast Asia. If you look at page 360, it shows you again a map of Southeast Asia and shows you the decades in which they were able to achieve their independence. We've already discussed Korea, Vietnam, India, and Pakistan. Other nations achieved their independence as well. In 1946, the Philippines gained its independence from the U.S. Remember, the U.S. had been preparing the Philippines for independence for some time, but World War II had delayed those plans, but eventually they became independent. Other European colonies also gained their independence as well. Lastly today, let's talk about the rebirth of Israel. The people of Israel have been around for thousands of years, right? The Jewish people, we've talked about them since, chapter 1 in our history book. And yet, since the Roman Empire times, they did not have a country of their own. After World War II and the Holocaust took place, many people around the world thought Israel finally deserved its own country. For 1900 years, the Jews had been without a homeland of their own. That was all about to change. The Balfour Declaration was the first official recognition that the Jews need a land to call their own. Arthur Balfour of the British government issued this policy statement, and the British began to favor the idea of a homeland in Palestine. But between World War I and World War II, nothing came of it. Finally, after World War II, in 1948, on a very testable date, the nation of Israel was reborn. Recognizing they could no longer control Jewish immigration or growing Arab resentment, Britain allowed the Jews to form their own nation in 1948. After Israel declared independence, the U.S. became the first nation to recognize this new country. Of course, all the countries around them were not thrilled with this new nation. Immediately after Israel became a nation, several Arab nations invaded. I mean, what a way to greet a new country. Hey, it's your birthday, you're a new country. We're invading. Actually, they invaded the day after Israel became a nation. Called the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the countries of Egypt, located down here, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon and Iraq, located over here, all attacked Israel. After a year of fighting, both sides signed a ceasefire. But that would not be the only conflict they would fight. Arab nations have continually threatened the existence of Israel, which has managed to beat back all attacks. The Jews seized areas that enhanced their security during the Six-Day War. For example, in 1967, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria prepared to attack again. This time, however, Jewish forces struck first and quickly destroyed most of the tanks, planes, and other weapons that were waiting to be used. The conflict was known as the Six-Day War, hence how long it lasted. From the conflict, Israel smashed the imminent Arab threat and seized control of several key areas that greatly enhanced Israel's security. Places like the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, as well as the Golan Heights. Why do the Arab nations hate Israel so much? Well, turn in your books to page 360, and I want you to read the purple box entitled Clashes Between Islam and the West. Please read that box to yourself. Once you have finished that box, we will be done for today. Hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good. Bye.